Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Friendly Ties podcast. I am here today with my friends Jonathan and Anastasia.
Hello.
Hey.
And we are here today to talk about Terra Mystica Lite, or my first Terra Mystica, which is called Terra Nova.
My first Terra Mystica. I like it.
All right, so we're here to talk about Terra Nova today. So for those of you who don't know, and probably many of you do, Terra Nova is, I'm not joking, it is the smaller, streamlined, cleaner version of Terra Mystica, which is a game that came out maybe a decade ago at this point.
Something about that.
Seriously?
And they sort of
Wow.
have, I think so. Yeah, it's had 2 expansions, and then they made Gaia Project, which is off the same like fundamental system. And then now they said, all right, we're going to go backwards because the Gaia Project was up in difficulty.
Mm-hmm.
So let's step it down in difficulty, go back to our core roots, and we're gonna make Terra Nova, which is just a streamlined, cleaner, smaller version of the Terra Mystica game.
Yeah.
And I'll say right now, I've been really excited for this game to come out. I love Terra Mystica. I've played tons and tons and tons of times on BGA in particular, but I also own a copy myself, and I've loved it since my first play.
That says a lot, considering you have
I know.
so
Wait,
few
wait,
games.
hold on. This is a game Nick actually owns.
I actually own this game. Yeah.
I don't believe you.
I do. I don't own any of the expansions or the mini expansions. I just own the like base fundamental game. It's in like, my dad got it for me for Christmas, and my dad's German, so I have a like German first edition
Oh
copy
my God,
like
I
right
love
when it came out.
I love it. Collector.
But I don't really get to play it with people too much because I've played so much at this point that like playing with anyone of my like local friends is kind of pointless. I'm just leaps and bounds better than other folks at the game, and just have so much more experience at it. So I'm super excited for the idea of Terra Nova. I was hoping essentially to play a game that had the same fundamental core concepts, but it was more accessible and then therefore more fun for other people to get into.
Sure.
How about the two of you? Where are you at in your experience levels of the Terra universe?
Yeah. First, I just want to pause and say that there is a Christmas parade occurring outside of my window.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah. Can we hear the sirens? And
a little bit.
Okay.
The Sirens of Joy.
It's good to hear that it's a parade, because I was worried the building next door was burning down.
I'm going to just hope for the best, because I'm pretty sure when the sirens stop, a marching band is going to start. So I'm pretty sure that there's going to be a very loud Christmas parade going on behind us. So we're going to just hope for the best here. So, I have played Terra Mystica, I want to say like 2 or 3 times. I played it on Yukata, and I'm pretty sure I did that thing where, I was like, I don't really know what I'm doing. Let me just play and see what happens. So like, I don't even know if I can count those plays, but I definitely have played it a couple times on there, and it's been years. But Gaia Project, I've actually played quite a bit. And it was interesting to me though, because in both cases, it's been a while. So when John was teaching the game, there was like this really lovely, like he finished and I was like, oh, that's basically Terra Mystica. Like, without all the extra rule overhead. Like, it's just like, I was like, cool. Like that like, that feeling that you get when you like sort of remember the rules to a game, but you remember like 70%. That's exactly what the teach of Terra Nova felt like to me. I was like, cool. I don't need to look at the rule book. I don't need to do anything else. Like, that's it. Everything that if I were to sit in conversation, say to you, what are the fundamentals of Terra Mystica? And I was like, oh, there's power, there's characters, there's these actions. That's it. That's all that Terra Nova is. And like, so I must admit, like when we sat down, I was like, this is lovely. Like, it's just in terms of like overhead, because that's what stops me. I owned Gaia Project for a while, and I was just like, I'm never going to play this solo. I'm never going to teach this to anyone. Like, it's too much. And even as we were playing this game, there was like, I was having like, we'll talk about this a little bit, like some almost trauma response to like the amount of overhead that goes into both of Terra Mystica and Gaia Project, the ability to mess yourself up, the number of little things you have to keep track of. That for me, it's a very enjoyable game when I'm playing it, if really got it loaded up and I'm like really dialed in. But it's a hard game for me to get to the table, and it's a very heavy game in my opinion that I don't find myself returning to all that often.
Yeah. I've played Terra Mystica 3 times, Gaia Project 6, I believe. I remember when Gaia Project came out, I was so excited about it. I'd played Terra Mystica and then, Terra Mystica in space. I love sci-fi settings and everything. And I ultimately enjoyed Gaia Project. I played it 3 times as many times as Terra Mystica. But my big takeaway from it is it almost did too much. It frustrated me. And what I really wanted was a game between Terra Mystica and Gaia Project, was kind of my fantasy for this type of thing. And then Terra Nova came out, and it's not between them. It puts Terra Mystica in between Gaia Project and Terra Nova. And so I was really curious to try it for sure because of that. Also, as the rules teacher, I like the idea of Terra Mystica with 30% less rules and less components and all that kind of thing. So yeah, I came in with it into this with pretty decent expectations as well. And I played this one 3 times now. And you two, we literally just played a 3-player game of this 20 minutes ago, and then we turned on the microphone. So we're trying to capture first impressions from the 2 of you. And, I've got a couple of games under my belt. One of them actually was a sponsored playthrough with Fens video on the John Gets Games YouTube channel. That's going to be myself and my friend Dave playing a 2-player game of it. So if you're curious, that one should have come out already. You can search for that and see about how the game plays. So first impressions, mine is positive with some nuanced opinions. What about you two?
I liked it. I'm a heavier gamer, and so it's not Terra Mystica or Gaia Project if that's what you're looking for. But I think it has that same sort of core loop. I've got a couple things that I like and a couple things that I dislike that we'll I'm sure kind of dive a little bit more into. But I liked it, but I wasn't in love with it, I think is my gut reaction.
I guess a better question specifically for you, Nick. I'm really curious about what Anastasia has to say as well. But Nick, since you've played Terra Mystica so many times, I was really curious to see your take, because it really seems like Terra Nova was designed, at least from my perspective, for people who Terra Mystica looked too complicated for, or maybe they tried Terra Mystica once and they're like, this is too much for me. So it's not Terra Mystica 2 in any way, and it almost seems like it was designed not for the Nicks of the world, and so that's why I'm quite curious to hear what a Nick thinks.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I don't think that this is necessarily a great game for just anybody to pick up, though. I think one thing that this game lives in is that I could bring it to a board game night and teach it to people, and that's pretty legit. But people who describe themselves as light gamers or party gamers, this is not for them at all.
Still too heavy, yeah.
It sits in I like to play, light medium games, difficulty level, and I think that is already a pretty flush market.
Yeah, we talk about those games a lot in this podcast, I feel like.
Yeah. So I'm not sure that it fills a unique space, which I'll be curious to see how it succeeds in the coming year or whatever.
Yeah, I completely agree with you guys. There's been a trend lately, I feel like, with these games where it's we take the heavier game and then we create the lighter version, right? And I think what sort of started with a lot of here's, Castles of Burgundy, the dice game, or here's Trois, the roll and write, or here's whatever, And so I think that it is interesting to now see this moving into truly new games, the Terraforming Mars. What is the Ares edition one called?
Ares Expedition, I think.
Yeah, okay. And it's been interesting because as a rule, I tend to be if I have gone to the effort to learn the heavier game, why am I going to play the lighter game, right? Within reason, except to your point, Nick, which is if I really love a game, ability to get it to the table. Although there still creates a gap here, which is essentially if I really love the game, is the lesser game, is it still even going to be worth my time to get the lesser game to the table, even with new people? Might I not find a different game or something else? So up to this point, I've been somewhat I'd rather play Terraforming Mars, or I'd rather play whatever, Castles of Burgundy or whatever, within reason, because some of those games create really unique, cool experiences. I actually really like Castles of Burgundy, the dice game, and I really like Castles of Burgundy. So it's always going to be a we'll see. And so I too was really excited to play Terra Nova, and I will say that for me, this delivered. I don't know that I would buy this game, I don't own Terra Mystica either, but I would happily play this game. Now I do have some qualms with it. But I think for me, in terms of like which one would I rather go to if it was just like, hey, let's sit down and we're going to play a game, I think I would pick this one up. And I think because of that added complexity, it was really nice to play a Terra Mystica that was only the 70% of the rules that I remember off the top of my head. You know, I think that delivered here, but I do think there are a few drawbacks to that. But this is a game that I feel like I can play against Nick and not feel like I'm just going to get murdered out of the gate, and and frankly beat him. So,
yes, yeah.
You know.
So we just finished a game, and numbers can be interesting. One number in particular, we played a 3-player game of Terra Nova, and it took about 80 minutes. It was my third play, the first time for both of you, but you're experienced with these kind of games. But that's not bad. There were definitely times in this play that we just did that I started sitting there feeling like that familiar feeling that I've had in Terra Mystica and Gaia Project of, oh, I've screwed up. This is a quite strategic game of resource management. There's really only one resource in this game. Well, kind of two: money and power. And it's a game where you're going to be going through rounds and you're spending money in a variety of ways to do a variety of things. And you're spending 4 money here, 6 money there, 7 money, 8 money. And you want to make sure that you can do the things that you need to in time. And definitely moments where I'm like, I'm 1 money short. I should have done this before that. And then I looked at the clock and it's like, oh, we've only been playing for 40 minutes and the game is over halfway done. Cool. Like I made a mistake. I'll try not to make that mistake next time. Whereas, I've really enjoyed playing Gaia Project. I played it 6 times, but from my recollection, those plays usually took between 2 and 3 hours. Like they're a heavy game, like a big time strategy game. And then the AP really sets in, even in that first hour, because I'm like, I don't want to make a mistake now that's going to cause me to be out of the running an hour and a half from now. Whereas in Terra Nova, it's like, if I make a mistake right now, that's fine. The game's going to be over in 40 minutes, and I'll try to learn from it and do it better next time.
All of these games have a snowballing aspect to them. I think that's what people like about the game. They like the economy infrastructure, right? There's something so satisfying in every one of these games about taking something off your board, putting it into play. I now look it down at my mat, and that is my income. It's a very, very clean mechanism. I think Terra Mystica was one of the first ones to really do it on a bigger scale.
Yeah.
And a lot of other game designs have, I think, taken it on since then.
I think Eclipse came out around the same time, but they were right there. Yeah.
When I see that now in a game, like my default is like, whoa, I'm going to like this game. Like I love the way that it is aesthetically and also mechanically, but it creates, having strong economic starts in all of these games is the fundamental core loop to the game. And I think one thing that I would levy as a criticism strategically against Terra Nova is that because there's only one resource, money, I mean, there's power, but let's we'll come back to power later. But like, since money is really the primary resource, I think the snowballing in this game is even more dramatic than the other games, because in Gaia Project, workers tend to be kind of the limiting factor, but you still need to pay attention to your money. In Terra Mystica, money and workers, but usually money tends to be more the limiting factor. And you can get into a situation where you've had a really strong start, but you only have essentially access to one of the resources. So you might kind of be choked out a little bit in terms of like, yes, you have a better economy than I do, but my economy is more balanced. And so actually I'm having just as good turns as you are kind of throughout the course of the game. Whereas in Terra Nova, if I explode at the beginning, if I have a stronger first turn, by definition, I just have more resources and I'm likely to just have a stronger second turn than you, and then a third turn, and so on and so forth, basically until the end of the game.
Yeah.
So it's nice that this game is shorter, because when someone starts running away, it's, I think, harder to catch them in this game than it is in the other ones, because it's not as, because it is smoother, right? It means that if you're in the lead, you're less likely to stumble.
There's less
something.
levers to pull to nitro
100%.
boost you back in or something. Yeah, take a risk and whatnot.
100%. And I want to like acknowledge that. So, we've just finished a game of this. I came out ahead, and like,
yes,
I was playing a faction that gave me 3 houses, and then houses were rewarded in the first turn. Like I kind of played into it.
You got more points and more money than both of us in the first round, and you want points and money in this game.
Exactly. But I'm used to playing Terra Mystica Gaia Project. I'm used to that feeling. I kind of referenced this earlier, that sort of like, trauma response is a little over dramatic for a board game. But what I'm trying to say is like that, just this feeling of, oh God, like that's not going to last, or I haven't thought hard enough about what I'm doing, or this is all going to fall apart, or I need to like analyze every little thing. And so Nick pointed out in like the second turn that I was like 10, 15 points ahead of them, and I was complaining. Like I was like,
You're
oh
like,
my
I
gosh,
don't know
I have
what to
nothing
do.
I'm stuck. I'm, like, and I was like, because had anxiety that like that was just gonna come crumbling down, and because I feel like in this game there is less to do. There's power is fairly static. Your abilities, there's so much of it. It's at 70% port, as we've been saying from Terra Mystica, but the things that they took out were kind of the edge cases, the sort of like slip around here or do this, or maybe, grab a little bit of something here. And like, so you can get to a position where in a round you may do two things and then kind of like have to pass because you're out of money or you're out of power. I mean, I think at most we took like 2 power actions a turn. Maybe that was an extreme. I think I took 1 power action a turn if I was lucky, and not even in every round. And so I guess like I totally agree with you, Nick, that there's just this element of like, because it's smoother, there's less to do, there's less to catch up. Like you said, you can also kind of like stay in the lead. Having said that, and I'm sure we'll talk about it, Nick then in the last round like roared ahead and then only lost by 1 point. So there still was a lot of balance in that. And like I said to them when we finished the game, I was really grateful to see that, because even though I did win and I was ahead from the beginning, I only won by 1 point, which in this game is not a tremendous amount of points. So
Yeah.
I thought that was really interesting too.
Yeah, one thing that jumped out to me the first time I played this one was that because there's less going on, there's no temple tracks, technology tracks, like that whole aspect of Terra Mystica and Gaia Project are gone. There is less ways to score points, and that makes sense as a streamlined experience. And in each one of the game's rounds, there's 5 rounds. You randomly pull out a token, and at this beginning of the game, so you know what they all are at the start, and that token incentivizes doing a particular thing. So like in round 1, maybe you really want to make trading posts, and in round 2, you really want to terraform, and in round 3, you really want to make the basic unit, and you get bonus points for doing those things then. So this is a big part of the planning and the strategy of the game is trying to get victory points from those. And when it comes to points in the game, those are a huge portion of them. There's also this incentive to make towns, which are, clusters of your buildings, and we don't need to go into those details. That's another good way to make points, and it's certainly something that you're angling for. But that's kind of it to a certain extent. At the very end of the game, there's one majority scoring for having the most of your buildings that are next to each other. But I found, I've played this game 3 times. I found that at the end of the game, you can certainly find yourself in a situation where that last round, you don't actually have that much that you can do to score victory points. I've had experiences where, I've had a bunch of money, like, 18 money, and I'm like, okay, I could build this building, I could build that building, I could upgrade this, I could upgrade that. But why? I realized, oh, wait, none of those things are actually going to get me to victory points. They might. In the game we just played, I was nowhere near close to either of you for the majorities of buildings, so it's not like I could even contest that. I mean, the 2 of you had incentives to build buildings and vie for that majority, which makes sense. And yeah, in the game that we just played, I took 1 action. I built a palace, which was nice, and it was incentivized. I got points. And then on my second action in the final round, I passed. And I got a bunch of points when I passed because of various other things. There's points on these passing tokens. I don't want to undersell the number of ways you can get victory points, but it is true that in the last round of the game, I functionally took 1 action. And I don't actually think that's necessarily a bad thing. It's just something to go into because, yeah, for these economic strategy type engine building games, you can expect that ramp. And that's not always the case. Sometimes that 5th round is maybe a little bit fizzly, at least as far as big moves are concerned, which again, is not necessarily a bad thing. It's just, trying to get points where you can and not throwing money away at things that don't give you points.
Yeah, to really leverage, I think, the last round in this game, it's like Gaia Project, for instance, is a game where I tend to end the game with too many resources, and I should have pivoted into scoring points more in the mid game when I was still kind of like building my economy. And Terra Nova, I think, has a similar kind of feel that you are supposed to prognosticate what you're doing for the next couple of rounds, round 3, 4, and 5, so that you have something to do on the 5th turn of the game. And if you don't have much to do on the last turn of the game, hopefully it's because you essentially cashed in your points in the 3rd and 4th rounds, and you're like, great, I'm okay with having sort of a fizzle end here. I think that's reasonable, but I do think that this strategically, I mean, like play wise, I think it's welcoming, but I do think still strategically, folks who have that better sense of the arc are going to have a different experience, a more not smooth, but they're going to understand like how they want to kind of score points over the course of those rounds. But a lot of the times, like you're going to get into a position where you're like, oh great, like because I don't have the research track or the temple tiles from Terra Mystica or from Gaia Project that say, hey, doing this thing scores points. I really I'm just scoring exactly what it tells me to do. Like I'm following the rules. A good little Terra Nova soldier here.
I mean, I think that like John said at the beginning of the game, he said, oh, well, he said to me, you're doing like a fairly traditional strategy. I don't remember exactly what you said, John, but you were just basically
you were playing towards those bonuses.
Playing the fundamentals.
Bread and butter, like just whatever the bonus for each round was, I was like trying to do it. I build my cities, and it did feel relatively vanilla. So like I do kind of want to like acknowledge that for the more serious, Terra Mystica Gaia Project fans, but Nick, sort of you're representing that in a lot of ways. Like for me, what was lovely is like I haven't played Gaia Project or Terra Mystica in a couple of years. Like it was just like fun. This is just like going back to its roots and just kind of getting like a lovely, 80 minutes of this game. What a nice treat, right? Like,
yeah.
But I was doing fairly basic stuff. Like, and so, some of the deeper strategies that you can get into in Terra Mystica or Gaia Project, like some of the things that can become like those like really cool moments where you're kind of like really playing into a faction's ability, or you're really getting into different things, or you have sort of a longer game or different ways to score points. Like that level of play obviously is not here. And so I think that it's important to note that like you are going to kind of be playing just a more vanilla game here, which is kind of, I think, what we're all sort of saying.
Mm-hmm.
But having said that, knowing the general arc of the game, it's not like something you really need to warn people about or anything. I think we all kind of recognized that there weren't a lot of ways beyond that to score points. And it was sort of like there was a little bit of pacing. I think, Nick, you mentioned like you bit off a little more than you could chew. You felt like at the beginning, although you clearly put it together. And what was really funny is that like, here we go. We play 5 rounds. John, in the last round, basically does one action and passes because he realizes that he can get the most points by just going out, if you will.
I did have some free actions with my faction to squeeze out some extra points. So, like, it was a pretty good one turn. But
no, it was great. It was great for him. But he realizes that's the best thing to do. I, built a palace because that was what was rewarded. I put out another town, and because it gave me the most connected buildings. And then I was like, cool, I pretty much done. Nick then, after both of us have passed, has this like bonkers turn that he's been building to the entire game where he
did like
suddenly
6 or 7 things. Yeah,
he does like all of this stuff. He makes 2 different settlements. He gets the bonus tiles and he gets all this stuff. And I think, Nick, we figured out you scored like with endgame scoring, you scored like almost 40 points in the last round.
Over half of your score came in that last round.
Yeah, more than double my score.
Yeah, more than double his score. Like, and so it was like Nick was like in this distant third, and then suddenly it was like he was 1 point away from tying the game. Yeah. And like, I'm not sure that, I mean, that speaks to the balance of the game, although, and I guess the different strategies, but I think that, I don't know if you'd agree, Nick, I think that like, in a way, you almost lucked out that all came together before the game ended. It's like almost like the game wasn't going to give you enough time or wasn't going to give you enough weight to play that way. I don't know if you would agree.
I would disagree. I did not luck out that it didn't happen at the end.
I feel like Nick had that last round in his mind all 5 rounds. I mean, it's a strategy game. Like, even though there's less levers to pull, this is a strategy game where the person who looks ahead the most will have a strong advantage. And I feel like Nick was looking ahead like Nick usually does, because Nick is very good at these kind of things, and played towards that. I feel like Anastasia didn't look ahead as much, but did a really good job at the short run things, like just always pressing the button that was going to give extra points in that round. And then I was just kind of faffing about.
You were trying to lean into your asymmetry, which is actually the thing that I would love to talk about next, because the thing that I think Also, so I think the boards and the income aspect is like one of the most unique things about the Terra Gaia whatever universe, or maybe not even unique at this point, but thing that I think is very hallmark-y of this style of game. But the other is the asymmetry and the fact that the factions are ridiculous, right? Like, I mean, that especially in like Gaia Project, the powers that they have are like just bonkers. And I will say that I think Terra Nova nails the asymmetry. In a game that is lighter and more vanilla, still, when I take a faction, I've got 4 unique things. 1 is my starting power. 2 is the way that you get income on your boards is unique. And then you have 2 strongholds that each give you a special power. So 4 ways that you can essentially unlock. 2 of them are natural to the game, and then 2 of them are your choice if you're going to unlock those things over the course of the game. And they're not as like weird or kooky as the ones in Gaia Project. They're not as imbalanced as the ones in Terra Mystica, but they are fun. And I do think that like when you sit down and you play, you're like, okay, like this is what I'm going to lean into with this faction this time. I do think that's cool. I do think that this game nails that. I was worried that it being lighter, it would take the aspect of that thing away. It would smooth over the edges of that asymmetry. And I don't think Terra Nova did that. I'm very excited about that.
Yeah, the game comes with 10 factions. There's 5 colors, and each one has 2 different faction options. So that's quite a bit of options right there. And yeah, I've played 3 out of the 10 now. I've played 3 games, and I've actually witnessed 8 out of the 10 being played over the course of those 3 games, which is cool. And yeah, I agree. Like, 80, 90-minute game, and you're like, okay, well, this is what my faction does. And at the start of the game that we just played, I played the Druids, and they essentially leaned into the power aspect of the game. Power is kind of the second resource. There's these 3 pools of tokens. You kind of swirl them around. It's functionally identical to Terra Mystica and Gaia Project, except that you can't gain or lose them. There's some differences to how you get them, but either way, my faction was all about that, and I leaned hard into that. In fact, I had a special thing that let me spend power to gain victory points, which is something that Nick and Anastasia could not do. So I spent the whole game trying to increase my my power generation, because my asymmetry is spend power to get points, so that seemed like it made sense. And I remember when I took the faction at the very start, I told both of you, I said, I am bad at this kind of asymmetry, like in games. My mantra in general is points are boring. Even though points are how you win games, points are boring. And so when the faction specific thing is, get more points than like have a new lever to pull to get points, that maybe doesn't play to my strengths. And I came in third, and that's fine. Again, it's not my strength, but it was fun leaning into it. This was my 3rd play, and it was the first time I ever had tons of power. Like in the previous 2 plays, I had a little bit. Like Anastasia said, every other round I was activating 1 or 2 of those power actions. I kind of had off rounds. But in the game we just played, every round I had maxed out almost all of my power. So you can have at most 8 to use at the beginning of a round, and I was pretty much there. And so that was fun. Like that felt asymmetric to me. That felt quite different than the previous 2 times I played. I wasn't able to leverage it very well, and that's, more on me. But, coming back to the length of time to play, which I know I'm harping on a lot, that's fine. Like I could see myself playing the Druids again and trying to learn from, kind of missteps that I had in the last time I played. And I know a lot of people play Terra Mystica and Gaia Project like that. But for me, when the game takes so much more time, like a 2 to 3 hour game, I'm like, no, I'm always going to play something different until I played everything new. Because I'm probably never going to actually play all of these. Whereas Terra Nova, I feel like, I don't know, there's maybe a world where I do play this more than 10 times and I do get to invest in more of these factions. So yeah, it's a thing to consider.
Yeah, I really like what you just said there, John. Like that idea that like because of the weight of the game and the length of the game, the likelihood that you're going to see so many more of the factions, that there's just like sort of an interest point there where you're like, oh, cool, like what else can I do? I mean, the last game that kind of did that this reminded me of, only in this one facet, was how I feel at the beginning of Arc Nova, when I'm like, ooh, I'm going to play a different zoo. I'm going to do a different thing. Because generally, I would say as a board gamer, I'm not a big fan of, I'm going to call module expansions. This is not a module expansion, right? This is playing a different faction. But when you have something like a modular expansion, like where it's like, oh, add this in or add this in or add this in, that's what Terra Mystica and Gaia Project remind me of when I sit down. It's like, okay, well, here's the game, but here's 10 different ways to play it. And so we even were talking when we started this game, Nick was like, I'm going to roll a D10 and pick one. And I was like, I love that you're going to do that, but like, I can't do that. Like, I can't. Like, I want to know what my options are, and then I want to pick the best one, right? Like, or I want to pick one that seems fun because it's going to dictate so much of the game. I mean, this is one of those games where the faction that you play, it changes the way you play. I mean, John was just talking about that. It changed the way you played. It changed the way Nick played. It changed the way I played. And so I needed to evaluate them. And actually, to the credit of the game, they were so simple. Like, just all I really wanted to know was like, what was their special power? And it was really easy for me to just go through them, because that's actually one of the things I dread when I sit down to play Gaia Project or Terra Mystica is like, gosh, like which one of these am I going to want to play this time? And they have best strategies and they have this, and you have to like, it's so much. Like I was like, cool, this is this, but even more so, and this is actually just a product of the presentation of the game. Each one comes with this very helpful little card. And I don't care how much of a board gamer I am or how many heavy games I play. I love me a good reference card. Like they heard me. I was like, ooh, this little card, it's telling me everything I could do. It tells me what my ability is. It tells me what each of my palaces do, so I don't have to like lift them up. It even had like a little strategy hint at the bottom in case you're like, well, wait, which direction do I go in? It was like, you know what? You should do this early. Like, this is good for you. And I was like, cool. I may or may not listen to that. But like, again, going back to that idea of the way I felt when John was teaching it, 15-minute teach, sitting down, being like, great, that like, as someone who's played these games, it's so easy to load up my faction. It took very little brain power. Like, it's been a long week. What a perfect way to play a game on Saturday morning. So I agree with both of you. Like, just they hit the ball out of the park, in my opinion, on how the factions play, how the experience is, and also how they're presented.
Yeah, the presentation part, I just want to co-sign. I think it cracks me up endlessly that they have these like Terra Mystica. They just had like all these fan factions released, and they always have like little unique iconography for what each new faction does. And I look at them having played hundreds of games of Terra Mystica. I'm like, I don't know what that does. Give me the text. Like, it's not, I can't read it. And in this one, they're like, okay, we'll give you the text. Like, thank you. Finally. Like, of course I need to look at this constantly. Like, I need to understand how my faction works.
Yeah.
Something you mentioned in the middle there, John, where you talking about the fact that you were playing with power in this game is, for me, the rest in peace aspect of Terra Nova. I think that power in this game is not cool. I really love the power mechanism, the 3 power bowls in Terra Mystica and Gaia Project. I think it's a loser in Terra Nova. I think there's a couple reasons for that. The main one is that Terra Nova does away with you being able to manipulate those to reduce rules overhead. But what that means is that you're just sort of at the whim of like what your power production is. I actually am not even convinced that the 3 bowl system makes any sense because there's no manipulation you can do for it. They really should just give you another resource, and they could even just call it power, and you just get it, you just have it, or you don't have it, and they could rework the numbers and everything would be fine. But this like tiered movement system doesn't matter in Terra Nova because you can't cheat the system in any ways like you can in Terra Mystica or you can in Gaia Project, and there aren't opportunities for you to feel clever with it. And so if that little mini mechanism, I think, is very, very cute. I've always been a big fan of that. And in this game, it does nothing for me.
Yeah, I actually couldn't agree with you more, Nick. I found myself multiple times in the game being like, okay, I don't have enough power. I won't have enough power. There's no way to get any more power. So cool. Or there was one point in the game where I spent most of the round just hoping that Nick and John would do something to give me power, and then I would be able to like accomplish the rest of my turn. And like there was a moment where I was like, you know, Nick did, and if he hadn't, I would have had to pass, and it felt really good, but it also felt really lucky. Like there's no way I could have controlled that. There's no way I could have known that was going to happen. And if he didn't, there was nothing I could do to get around that. And so I did really miss that. Like even the ability to spend money for power or to eat your power, like any of those little things. And I'm sure, you know, that may end up coming in expansion, or maybe there are people who want slightly heavier rules overhead might come up with a variant or something. But I think that I would love to see a way where that got more interesting, or where that had more potential. And I see why it got lifted. I liked the reference point, but I too was like, gosh, I wish I could tweak this a little bit more. And I did just kind of have to play into it and say, okay, well, at most you're going to get one power action, and that power action is going to come from whatever you produce at the beginning in your income phase. Cool. Okay. That's all I can really rely on. And that worked. Once I kind of put myself in that headspace, that worked for me, but I missed it. And I could see playing this game multiple times, just kind of like wishing that there was more there.
Yeah, I hate to say it, but I am, for the most part, agreeing with you. Like I said, I just played a faction that really leaned heavily into the power, and that was cool. Like, I had an extra lever to pull to spend it, but I hadn't thought about it, Nick. I think you really got to the core of it. There isn't ways to be creative about it. Like, I was able to have lots of power because of income, and income isn't creative. Like, income is good, and I leaned into that and I got it. But yeah, in the middle of the round, the only way you get power is if people build next to you. And we just played a 3-player game. In a 4-player game, there's probably going to be a little bit more of that. But yeah, in the other games, you can burn power to gain extra. Also, there's buttons in Gaia Project to press that charge up your power in the middle of the round. And yeah, streamlining out makes sense, but I feel like this needed another pass as well. Like, maybe 2 bulls. Maybe it works with 2 bulls so that it works a little bit differently than money, and it's like you have to spend it to be able to have it in the bottom to then charge it. Like, that makes it fundamentally a different type of resource. And then, the cuteness maybe feels a little bit less drudgery, like having to go from bull 1 to bull 2 and all from bull 2 to bull 3. Or just, having some factions that have buttons to press that actually move those. It does feel like a little bit of a missed opportunity. It almost feels like the design core idea of the game was like, okay, we're doing Terra Mystica Light. Well, we can't mess with the 3 bulls, because whenever anybody thinks about Terra Mystica, they think about those 3 power bulls. Like, that's like almost the very first thing. So they left that pristine. They didn't modify that, and they kind of took away some of the infrastructure for it. And yeah, a bit of a missed opportunity. I mean, it doesn't sink the game for me, but that mechanic does feel a lot less fun.
Yeah. And to give it some credit, you still do have that element of building next to each other, and it does keep you tight. It does keep you building closer to each other. There's some other ports, it's cheaper to build a trading house or whatever by building next to each other. Like, I liked that element. I liked that I was able to accomplish my turn because Nick built. I liked that over the course of the game, I got a fair amount of power because of you guys. Like, there's still the echoes of what makes that system cool, but I do worry with a new player too, sitting down, it's 15 minutes for us because we've all played Terra Mystica Gaia Project, but the new player, it might take 5 minutes alone just to explain the power bowls and what an easy place to potentially screw up in your game. I think that is a place where I agree with you, John. Maybe there will be some other factions or some other things, some other opportunities to make that a little bit more interesting and kind of like worth the overhead for what it is within the scope of this game.
Yeah, I mean, it still has the game still has the building near people is good, but of course there's always the chance that they'll block you off. Getting blocked is not as bad in this game as it is in Terra Mystica, because the wheel is only 5 circles long rather than 7 circles long. So, if you get blocked, generally you can escape valve somewhere else. And I think all of that stuff is the hallmark, certainly, of a game that is just, it's just the lighter version of Terra Mystica. Like, those things are going to be a little bit less rude. I am very curious about your point, though, Anastasia. Like, I'd love to break this game out, teach it to someone totally new, and see, they haven't played any Terra Mystica, any Gaia Project, and see what their impression of the game is. And the one thing I wish that we had on this podcast right now is one of us having had that experience. Because I honestly can't even speak. I can't take this game out of the context of the other games that they've made. And that's kind of interesting, right? Like, I'm essentially, we're at a space in board games, and you were talking about this all the way at the beginning, Anastasia, that we're now consuming board games in the context of other board games, rather than things being like, oh, wow, like that's no one's ever done something like that before, right? And I'm not even talking about like, oh, it's a deck builder like Dominion, right? I'm talking about like, you've played this exact game, it's this, but we took these things out. And you're like, oh, you can design that? You're allowed to do that?
I do think that if you taught this to somebody who had never played any of this type of game before and they liked it, you could so easily teach them Terra Mystica at that point. Like, this almost feels like a tutorial for Terra Mystica. Because if you busted
Ooh.
out Terra Mystica and put it on the table, you'd be like, okay, think Terra Nova, cool. Now we'll add 30% more rules, and this is what this special other board does. But like, there's so little changes, like just a few caveats. It's just this plus this plus this plus, and it's very, yeah, like you said, we're looking at it from the going backwards mindset, but the going forwards mindset, I could totally see that working. I really could.
So interesting, John. That's funny. I really hadn't thought about it that way. I sort of thought of this as like a replacement, right? Like, whereas like, oh, we'll have this because, to your point at the beginning of this podcast, Nick, you were like, oh, I don't know. I need to, I'm never going to get Terra Mystica to the table. This is the one I'll play with, whatever X group of people. But how fascinating to think like, yeah, this could be how I kind of get a buy-in, right? Like we play this and then I get my group to the next game. I get that they get the level of strategy here and it takes it to the next level. That's really interesting, John. And I do kind of like want to go back to something that I said, in the middle, and I was saying, Nick, was it luck there at the end? And he was like, no. And so I want to acknowledge that, I think I rescind that point that I made, and I think it's important that I say that, because when I'm sitting here reflecting at the end of this conversation and kind of looking at all of this is a game that does offer a lot of depth for what it is. I mean, no, it's not a 3-hour version of Terra, it's not Terra Mystica. It's not 3 hours. It's not as deep. There's not as much going on, but there are a lot of paths to victory. There is an ability to kind of do the generic thing, come out ahead, kind of like ride that lead through. There's an ability to build what Nick did, build a bunch of stuff and kind of wait and then just go massive at the end. There's what John did, just like play into his faction's power and see how that turns out. And like, that's 3 different unique strategies of play with a game with 10 different factions that offer 10 different inherently unique strategies of play. Like, that's really cool. There's a lot of game here for what is an 80-minute game. There were still a number of turns where we kind of had to stop and think and be like, wait, I need to think about what I'm doing, but not so much downtime that I ever got bored. Like, it was just the right weight for a game that we could all really enjoy, given the level of gamers that we are, that I do think would be accessible to people who normally would be turned off by a game of the weight of Terra Mystica or Gaia Project. And I think that is it's a huge credit to what they've done here. And thinking about it, particularly in that context, John, if I was a big Terra Mystica fan, getting this game, introducing this to people, particularly like my significant other or otherwise, like that would be really cool. And I think that's the space where this lands for me. Like this is not a game that I need to own just because I'm not as big a fan like of Terra Mystica. It's not that I'm not a fan. It's just there are other games I would rather play, but I find both really enjoyable, and I would happily play this anytime. Like, in fact, I let's play next week. Like, this is great. It's like a great game. I don't need to introduce more people in my life to Terra Mystica, but via Terra Nova or otherwise. But if I did or I wanted to, this is a good one.
One point you said in the middle there, I do want to kind of hold up, and that is that, while we talked a little bit, the game is a little bit more vanilla in some ways and whatnot, there's still quite a bit to think about. And, we've played a lot of games, in particular with Nick, and Nick frequently is a quick player of games, especially the games that Anastasia and I like to play, like, lighter rule sets, 60 to 90 minutes. Like, it's Nick's turn and Nick just does the thing. And then we move on and it's Nick's turn and Nick just does the thing. He's got it all mapped out. And there were several times where Nick just did the thing, but there were also many times in this play where, I don't know, Nick took a minute just sitting there thinking. And it wasn't like crazy analysis paralysis or anything, but I remember sitting there thinking about Nick thinking, being like, there's stuff to think about here. Like, there's definitely plans and strategies. It's not like obvious. The decisions are not obvious. Occasionally they might be. Like in the last round, it's like, oh, okay, well, the obvious thing for me to do is to build a palace and then pass. But it was the end of the game. Like, that was the culmination of my strategy as opposed to the beginning. There's quite a lot to think about, even right in the setup of the game. Not too much, but definitely something there.
I just want to say that I think the sequencing in all of these style of games is so important because of the economic nature of the games, because they make your income, which then, as we talked about earlier, snowballs into other things. And because this game is shorter, because you have essentially, like, because it's shorter, there's a more tighter constrained space. that sequencing becomes even more significant. I don't think that the decisions are paralyzingly difficult at all. I think that on a lot of turns, it's like, okay, it seems like I'm going to maybe do these 4 or 5 things, and I get to choose 2 or 3 of those 4 or 5 things. So that's kind of the decision space that you're often thinking about. I think relatively accessible, but you still need to make sure that you've like thought it through.
Yeah, but not in the same way, like you said, not in the same way of those heavier games. Like I kept thinking there must, be more. I need to double check all of my things here. And I was like, no, okay, it's a smaller decision space, but still plenty to chew on. And I liked that. I liked that there was still a good number of options, but not so many that I was really like, my head did not hurt at the end of this game.
Yeah.
But, it felt like it had gone for like a lovely walk and, found some interesting things along the way.
So to wrap this one up, my take on this one after playing it 3 times is that I really feel like I could very happily play this game at least 7 more times to try all the factions. I'm curious. There are a couple factions I would like to try again, particularly the first one that I played very poorly. But I think one of the bigger takeaways for me about this is, I'm in a lot of ways the primary rules teacher of pretty much every group I go into. And I love how simple this game is to teach. And I have not taught this to somebody who has no framework, and that will definitely be a longer than 15-minute teach, but I would so rather put this in front of that person than Terra Mystica or Gaia Project. I will 100% do it. I mean, I own the game. I have a copy, so that will be the option that I go for, and I definitely lean towards that. I get rules teach fatigue sometimes, especially with a lot of modern Euros. There's just a lot going on, and I'm like, oh, I want to play that game, but do I really want to teach it? And this one, I'm not going to balk at teaching it at all. So yeah, I'm really happy that I have it. For full disclosure, I don't own Terra Mystica, but I do own Gaia Project. I still have that, even though I haven't played it in about 4 years or something like that. And I don't think this necessarily fires Gaia Project. In fact, to a certain extent, after playing 3 games of Terra Nova over the last month, I kind of want to bust Gaia Project out again.
Yeah, it kind of makes you want to play it, doesn't it? I was thinking the same thing. I was like, let's play some Gaia Project.
So I could see both of these in my future.
Did anything happen like 3 years ago that made it hard for you to start playing Gaia Project?
I can't imagine anything that would make that happen. No.
Awesome. Well, that I think is going to bring a wrap for Terra Nova for us. This has been it's been really fun playing this and seeing sort of the evolution of the Terra world. But I'm definitely looking forward to playing this game more often with y'all. Its time space, I think, is going to be one where we're going to put it on the table, I know, a couple times in the next month or 2 for sure.
Yeah.
Or the digital table.
As the case may be with us.
And as John mentioned earlier in this podcast, he's going to have a playthrough with friends for Terra Nova, so you can check out him playing a 2-player version of this game. I will say I think this game is going to be sweetest at 4 players, but I think it's still going to work really well at 2, so you can check that out and watch it for yourself. But thanks for coming along on this ride with us. Thanks, Jonathan and Anastasia, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.